Hello everyone, I'm Luke and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am bringing you my long-awaited movie review for Murder on the Orient Express. It was absolutely fantastic. And I have to tell you, I am a die-hard Agatha Christie fan. I discovered her books when I was a freshman in high school, and she's the reason why I now write as a profession. I write mysteries. I started out writing mysteries and then I evolved into writing other works of fiction because of Agatha Christie. So I owe a lot to her. And I, of course, if you watched my most anticipated movies of the year video, this was in the top 5 movies I was looking forward to seeing. And with that, I already knew everything. I knew the plot, I knew the characters, and I knew the twist ending all going into this movie. So what I was hoping to see was just how good of an adaptation it was. Because there is the original film from 1974, which is fabulously well acted by a cavalcade of movie stars back then. And then there was a 2010 TV movie version that was made as part of the BBC television series Agatha Christie's Poirot. So how does this film favor as an adaptation? Because I found that the biggest complaint that critics were saying, which is probably why it has a 67% average on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is really unfair, is they were saying that this was an unnecessary remake because we already have a film version from 1974. But I don't agree, because my biggest issue with the 1974 movie is that Sidney Lumet turned this murder mystery drama into a comedy. He shoehorned in so many jokes to lighten the mood that it completely juxtaposes what Agatha Christie was famous for. She didn't write murder mystery comedies, she wrote murder mystery dramas. And I also think that the 2010 TV movie version that starred the great David Suchet, who played Poirot for 25 years on television, even though that's a much better version than the movie, that TV movie still feels rushed. It feels like the Cliff Notes version of Murder on the Orient Express. And so going into this one, I was very curious how it would favor in terms of adaptation. And this is not a remake. I don't classify this as a remake because the book has been in public domain for over since 1934. And I would just consider this a new adaptation of her classic work. And here's what makes this version different from its predecessors. The tone is perfect. It does have comic relief moments sprinkled throughout, but it doesn't sacrifice the integrity of the rest of the story. This is still very much a murder mystery drama, and it's fully well realized in this version. Also, Kenneth Branagh's direction. He fully understands Poirot, and I think he gets that through both his direction and his acting performance, which we'll get into later. But also, with his direction, it's very, very grounded and realistic. I think shooting it on a soundstage and also with a real train with real carriages makes it all the more realistic. And it is a period piece, mind you, that is set in 1934, but it doesn't feel dated. That's the good thing. There are old-fashioned moments in the movie, but are done in a very contemporary manner, which therefore still make it fresh and accessible, I think. And one of the best elements about this is that this is a star-studded ensemble cast effort, and everybody does such a fantastic job with their roles. And I'll get into them once I finish talking about the production. Which I'm going to talk about right now. So the production. Cinematography was stunning. I think those beautiful exterior landscape shots were some of the most visually stunning sequences I've ever seen in a movie. And it really took my breath away at how fantastic Kenneth Branagh's work was. But even more gorgeous than the cinematography was the physical production design. The interior of the carriages, of both the dining car, the lounge car, and also the sleeping carriage, were done so brilliantly in a beautiful Art Deco fashion that it was just stunning. I hadn't seen that before in either the original movie or the TV adaptation. This really felt like an authentic 1930s Art Deco look to it, and I thought it was beautiful. And speaking of beautiful, the costumes. Every single person in this movie has a beautiful costume that not only matches their character, but is distinctive and really, really fantastic. I think that everybody is dressed so gorgeously. And hair and makeup. Fantastic. Now, before I actually talk about the cast, I will say this. This movie is not without its problems. There are a couple of minor things that I will say that are problems with this movie. It's not perfect. But I think that that's mostly due in part to the fact that the nature of adapting a book to film is so challenging. Because you have to sacrifice elements that are in the book that you can go further into detail in that you can't always do in a movie setting. And unfortunately, there are several characters that get the short end of the stick in terms of screen time and also character development. Everybody did a great job, but there were some characters that were condensed and others got more screen time. That was just my biggest complaint. And there were a couple of moments when the cinematography was a little bit odd. There were a couple of overhanging shots that were done that felt a little bit weird in terms of it wasn't used throughout the rest of the film. There were two scenes where the overhead camera was used in two of the scenes in the sleeping carriage. But the rest of the cinematography was beautiful. Those two moments were just a little bit weird. And also, I feel that once again, going back to that adaptation problem, the second half of the film is very rushed. The first half is perfectly wound, it's cohesive, it introduces all of our characters brilliantly, but when you get into the investigation and then therefore the solution to the case, there are elements that start to feel rushed in certain moments. And I wish that the movie had just taken its time. If it had just slowed down a little bit and let the characters have their moment and just let the story breathe a little bit more, it would have been a perfect movie. But the ending is still very poignant and very tragic, which I will get into in the spoiler section of this video. Now, as for the cast, everybody does a beautiful job. Every single person's character is well realized. It's just some people got more screen time than others. So the standout performances for me were Michelle Pfeiffer as Mrs. Hubbard, Daisy Ridley as Mary Debenham, Leslie Odom Jr. as Dr. Arbuthnot, Tom Bateman as Monsieur Bouc, and Kenneth Branagh as Poirot. I would definitely say that even though no one will be better than David Suchet from the TV series, I think that Kenneth Branagh is the best Poirot that we've ever had on film. He's much better than Albert Finney, and he's much better than Peter... I don't know how to pronounce his last name, and I feel really bad about it, but he played Poirot in a couple of movie adaptations. But Kenneth Branagh is the best Poirot that's ever been done on the big screen, because he fully understands Poirot. He recognizes that Poirot is someone that people do not take seriously because he's Belgian, he's very OCD, he has a funny mustache, he walks with a cane, he has a high-pitched Belgian accent. So, and majority of the time, the British and the American characters in Agatha Christie's books don't take Poirot seriously, but you can't argue with Poirot's results, which is why Kenneth Branagh fully understands this character, in my opinion. It's just fantastic. So now, I'm going to get into spoilers, but let me just say this. If you have never seen any of the pre-existing adaptations and you've never read the book, I recommend that you see this movie. If you're a fan of mysteries, if you're a fan of old Hollywood movies, I would say that this is the closest in comparison to... It has elements of Alfred Hitchcock glamour to it, but also that old 1930s and 40s Warner Brothers and MGM movies from that bygone era of film, which I think it fully realizes it and does it so brilliantly. And if you're a fan of anybody in the cast, I recommend that you go see this. So don't try to go into it without spoilers. So I hope that you enjoy the rest of this, the movie. And for those of you who do know the ending, let's talk about spoilers right now. Okay. So I felt it was kind of hilarious and a little bit ironic that the ad campaign was featuring Johnny Depp's Ratchet as one of the suspects. I thought that that was hysterical because I knew that Ratchet was going to die. He's the victim. He's the one who dies on the Orient Express. And for the movie to try to tease the fact that Johnny Depp's character might be a suspect rather than the victim was so hysterical. So, of course, Ratchet still dies in this version, and yes, he is still Cassetti, who is responsible for the Armstrong kidnapping case, which therefore caused the destruction of the entire Armstrong family. Daisy was kidnapped and murdered. Her mother died out of shock going into premature labor with the second baby she was carrying, and she and the baby died in childbirth. The father committed suicide, and the French maid was arrested and as a potential conspirator in the crime, and Cassetti got away scot-free. And they don't change the ending. Everybody on the train is a member of the Armstrong household. They were either family members or they worked for the Armstrongs, and they all got justice for what happened to the Armstrongs. So they're all responsible for the death of Ratchet. And this is why Murder on the Orient Express is one of the most memorable of Agatha Christie's books, because Poirot has such a distinct, clear moral compass of what's right and wrong. This case really tests him to his limits, because are these people murderers, or are they seeking justice and doing an execution of someone who is literally the embodiment of full evil? So that's why Poirot has to sort of swallow his pride a little bit and present the attendant's uniform to the police and say it was an assailant who snuck on board the train disguised as an attendant, went into Ratchet's room with a passkey, stabbed him in his sleep, and then escaped off the train. And he lets these people go free because they now finally have justice. And that's what makes this book so poignant and what makes the ending still really truly work. And Michelle Pfeiffer's performance at the very end of the film, when the solution is revealed and she says, "Send me to prison, let these people go, I'm the one that orchestrated all of this," and Poirot has to walk away and really, really think about this. And he presents the first solution to the crime, which is the fictional version, because he knows that these people don't deserve to go to prison. They were just carrying out justice when the law, unfortunately, wasn't able to help them. And that's what makes this story so tragic, but also beautiful in a manner of speaking. Now, as for the changes that are made to the material, Poirot is definitely made a lot more stronger and a more active version than ever before. There are those two scenes that you see in the trailer where he's chasing someone down the wooden staircase and he gets into a fight with Dr. Arbuthnot, but that's only because he's defending himself. It's not like Poirot is like action Poirot. He's just very prepared if he needs to defend himself, and he does it brilliantly in the movie. Several characters are changed from the original book. Greta Olsen, who's the Swedish missionary, is switched out for Pilar Estravados, which is played by Penelope Cruz, as a Spanish missionary. Antonio Foscarelli, who's a Italian car salesman, is turned into Marquez, who is a Cuban car salesman. And Cyrus Hardman, who is a private detective posing as a traveling salesman, is turned into Gerhard Hardman, who is once again a private detective posing as a Austrian professor. Now, the two biggest changes that bothered me the most were, one, the Count and the Countess Andrenyi are barely in the movie. It's really bothersome that they're not in the film as much as they are in the book, because the Countess is Sonia Armstrong's sister and therefore Daisy's aunt. And the Count is the one who takes his wife's place. When they all take one stab into the body of Ratchet, the Count does it for his wife. He lets her sleep because she's still haunted by what happened, and he stabs Ratchet in honor of his wife, and he swears that she never left the compartment the night of the murder. And that's a very important scene, and they just gloss over it. And it really, really bothered me. Now, one of the biggest changes to the characters were that Colonel Arbuthnot, who is Mary Debenham's love interest, and Dr. Constantine, who's a secondary character that boarded the train at a random stop on the road, are meshed into the same character with Dr. Arbuthnot. And he's played by Leslie Odom Jr. Now, when I heard that he had gotten cast, I thought, oh, wow, colorblind casting. What a fantastic way to diversify your movie. Unfortunately, the racism angle is played up in this version. Gerhard Hardman has this one scene in the dining car when he tells Book, who's the owner of the Orient Express, I don't want to be seated at a table with his kind. But Mary Debenham, played by Daisy Ridley, brilliantly calls him out on his bullshit and says that he's being flat out racist and rude. And Gerhard has a line where he says, it's not fair to them that they try to be rubbing shoulders with us. And he points to her table and says, you wouldn't mix your white wine with your red wine, would you? And she looks at both of them, picks up her red wine, dumps it in her white wine, and she says, I always loved a good rosé, and she drinks it and then walks out of the dining car. It was the best moment in the entire movie. I absolutely loved it. And their love interest, their romantic relationship is still very much played up in this movie, but there's that added subtext layer of the fact that they can't be married in the United States because of the color of his skin. But Poirot brilliantly says there's nothing wrong with it here in Europe, and you don't have to hide your feelings for one another. So Poirot understands, and Daisy Ridley just did a fantastic job, and so did Leslie. That's why they were two of my favorite standouts. So in conclusion, this movie is a very faithful adaptation of Agatha Christie's work that does have some minor problems, but makes up for it in spades. The cast is phenomenal, the production design is beautiful, the directing is perfect, and I even came to love Kenneth Branagh's mustache. I really thought it was fantastic. Even though it's not like it is in the original book, I thought it was very, very charming. So thank you all so much for watching my review of Murder on the Orient Express, a movie that I truly, truly think that everybody should watch. It's just a fantastic film overall. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, click the bell icon for notifications. My links to Instagram and Twitter are in the video description, and I'll see you next time.